Well, good morning from Langlands Garden Centre. I'm here for the Weighton Wolds Classic Car Show again. Did this event last year, really enjoyed it, so I decided to come back. I'm actually starting off today at the Vintage Japanese Motorcycle Club, where I bumped into Phil. Now, Phil, you've got a really interesting 1970s Japanese motorcycle, because this Suzuki is actually a two-stroke and it's a 750, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes. This is the Suzuki GT 750. This one in particular is the M model, which is 1975. So that puts it in the middle of the run of the bikes that they produced back in the day.
Okay.
First model arrived in 72, a few years after the CB 750 Honda, and ran through to 1977, at which point the death knell was sounded for two strokes, and basically pretty much all disappeared.
Yeah. So with regard to the two strokes, was it emissions that killed them in the end?
It was emissions, particularly from in America.
Right.
Big market for the Japanese motorcycle industry, particularly with larger bikes. So yes, the likes of the Kawasaki triples, the KHs, the Suzukis and the Yamahas ultimately disappeared.
Right.
Carried on running into the 80s, but tended to be in smaller capacities. And then of course these days pretty much all four strokes, with one or two specialist two-stroke manufacturers, but few and far between.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of great bikes from that era around, isn't there? A lot of things like your Kawasaki Zs and your Honda CBs.
Yeah.
What was it about the GT that attracted you then?
I was typically always a Suzuki man.
Right, okay.
Just because of my age.
Right.
16, I'll admit to being on a push maxi,
Okay.
step through moped, bought for £50 by my grandfather, so that's his fault why I'm into bikes. And then I just ended up with a Suzuki A100, GT250, where you can still ride them at 17.
Yeah.
GT550, nearly bought the Wankel rotary engine Suzuki, the RE5, which are even rarer than the GT750s.
Yeah.
But opted for the GT750. So originally, back in 1977, was my first big bike, and my last GT until I acquired this one.
Right. So it was just a natural progression, and then obviously getting this one, it was sort of nostalgia because.
Yes,
these are the bikes
usual thing, retirement, messing around with motorbikes, collecting the ones I never had and restoring.
So, from a point of view of riding and owning, how does riding a big two-stroke differ from any of the four-stroke bikes?
It differs in performance. It's not as smooth a ride as you might imagine, being a two-stroke, but then it is a 50-year-old bike.
Yeah.
Well, 49 years old to be precise. It doesn't have a huge amount of engine braking.
Right.
So we tend to use the gearbox a lot more. And it's heavy by modern bike standards.
Right.
It is a heavy bike.
Do you tend to find the powers higher up the rev band with it being a two-stroke?
It is to some degree, yes.
Yeah.
There's plenty of four strokes with power up the band as well, like a Kawasaki GPZ 500S, which I've got in the garage, little twin, which takes off over 7,000 RPM. This is probably flat out at 7,000 RPM.
Right.
But it will rev up to that. There's no problems with that.
Excellent.
As long as you use the revs and the gears, it's nice little bike. Never really a sports bike.
No.
More a Grand Tourer, hence the designation. And it is heavy at about 250 kilos, quarter of a ton, 500 and something pounds for those in Imperial.
Right.
But yeah, you get used to it. I'm not as young as I was. I've shrunk, so I'm on my tiptoes when I come to a stop.
Right.
Particularly riding around North Yorkshire, the North York Moors and the Wolds. A lot of roads with junctions on cambers.
Yeah, cambers and potholes.
So you need to be mindful of which way the camber is when you're actually coming to a halt and putting your foot down.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight to hold up.
Yeah.
But, not dropped it yet. Touch wood.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And thoroughly enjoying it. And obviously a member of the VJMC, so I meet up with these guys and have a look at their bikes and have a chat about things like you do.
Yeah.
And yeah, good crack.
Well, that's smashing. Well, thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
We're going to go have a look at some cars now. Obviously, I will leave some links in the video description, both to Weighton Wolds Rotary Club, who've organised the event, and of course to groups like the Vintage Japanese Motorcycle Club as well. Right, let's go and have a look around. Well, last night I managed to pack a lot of my gear. I made sure all the cameras were charged up, all the microphones were charged up, even made sure all the cameras were packed in the bag and everything ready for today. What did I manage to forget though? Well, I forgot the tripod. So the camera you normally see me filming interviews on with my microphone, I won't be using because I ain't got anything to stand it on, so I'll be doing things a little bit more run and gun today. So this will probably be something of a whistle-stop tour of today's show, but there's still plenty to see, so we'll try and cram in as much as we can. Got the lovely Renault 8 behind me now. When I saw this car come in, I had to come and see it, not only because obviously I'm a fan of old Renaults, but this particular one is a Gordini. This one's got the single headlights rather than the twin headlights, and rather than the 1300 engine, it's actually got 1108, which went into many Renaults over the decades. Twin Solex carbs on there, suspension as well, slight differences on there. So I've just had a look under the rear end of this car. You've got twin shocks on both sides at the back of the car as well. Yeah, these are a real rarity in this specification. I'm also told that this car originally was owned by the man who maintained John Surtees' everyday car. So you never know the remarkable stories behind some of these cars. But yeah, as I say, this is a real rare car by any stretch, but to find one in this configuration as well really is something special. For anyone who's not familiar with the 8, there was a small 4-door saloon car from the era where Renault tended to put the engines at the back, so you've got an engine slung out the back with a transmission in front driving the rear wheels. Obviously luggage area up front. Where the number plate is, you have a little drop down panel, and that's where the spare wheel is concealed behind. I have sat in an 8 once before, not a Gordini, and yeah, like a lot of old cars, it's a little bit echoey inside, but it's very much a car of its time. But yeah, these Gordinis are getting really popular now, when they've even been immortalised in games like Gran Turismo as well. It's always nice to see a few TVRs at these shows. We've got the Chimera behind me over there, and my personal favourite, the Griffith 500. I remember these coming out, and yeah, these sort of curvy body shells and these smoothed off headlamps, they just looked right, really did look great. And of course their TVRs have always been quite an imposing vehicle. Surprised actually, the interiors on these are actually sort of quite sedate. Some TVRs that you see are quite leery inside and out, but yeah, these are a little bit more traditionally styled. Fantastic cars. Well, we've got no shortage of V8s. We've had a couple of Marcos here today, which are quite rarely seen. We've also obviously had those TVRs, and we've got Triumph Stag as well. This one's actually in really remarkable condition. But if you like cars with only 6 cylinders, well, don't worry, we're not going to disappoint there either. We do have some stuff that's slightly more modern. Porsche Boxster 986 generation. I've actually been offered a couple of those, so hopefully I'm going to get one of those reviewed at some point next year. There's also a first generation BMW Z3, which I haven't been offered one of those yet, but I would like to try one because I've already done the Mercedes SLK. So if anyone's got one of those that you're willing to, and you live in the Yorkshire area, that you'd be willing to loan me for a few hours, do drop me an email. Links are in the video description. But if you want something a little older and maybe something a little bit more raw, you're probably not going to be able to do much better than something like this TVR Tuscan here. Well, in addition to all the MG sports cars, we've got this lovely Austin Healey. One that really stands out to me though is this Triumph, because we've got a GT6. I've always quite liked the Spitfire, which was the ragtop version, but the GT6 is probably a bit rarer. We've got the coupe body and we've got the 6-cylinder engine. So this is a 1973 Mark III model, 2-litre straight 6 engine in these, and this one, being a later car, has got the transverse leaf spring at the back as well. Early Spitfires and such like, they had issues with the rear wheels sort of tucking under, and there were a few revisions made to the suspension on those cars over the various iterations of them. This colour is obviously divisive as well. To my eyes it looks purple, it's listed as magenta red, but again, it's 1970s, and I suppose purple is a very 70s colour for a car. But no, I actually do quite like these old Triumphs, and I also like the Heralds and the Vitesse, which have a very similar sort of front hinge bonnet. And if you got the Vitesse, you got the 6-cylinder engine like you get in this car behind me here as well. Now, some cars are a little bit more understated, and this one I very nearly walked past. So we've got a Ford Orion. Now, the Orion was always a little bit of a more traditional, slightly more upmarket take on the ever popular Ford Escort. So what marks this one out has been so special then? Well, it's a 1600E. The 1600E was basically the posh one. So we've got leather interior and wood in there as well. But yeah, you simply just don't see them. Occasionally you might see the odd gear, but the 1600E really was the creme de la creme when it came to Ford Orions of this era. Of course, one old Ford that you can't walk past without immediately knowing what it is the Fiesta XR2 Mark 1 in this particular version as well. Looks in immaculate condition as well. That's really nice to see. Sometimes you get Fords that are a little bit rarer than others, like this Ford Console Classic behind me, which I actually featured here last year. There's also an Escort Estate that I featured last year, which is a rather special car with an interesting story as well. I'm going to leave some links to last year's video at the end of this one. Hope that you've enjoyed the show so far. Sit tight because we've still got plenty more to come. In the meantime, have you considered becoming a Mark on Motoring channel member and join the likes of Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV and Dinosaur Dad, who are currently enjoying early access to some of my car review videos, such as the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray and the Mazda MX-5 RF. There'll also be some behind the scenes content coming through soon as well. In the meantime, back to today's video. So I've just bumped into this lovely lady by my side here. Now Annie, you're the proud owner of this Ford Model Y, and this car's been in the family a long time, hasn't it?
She has. She's been in the family since 1962. So she's 62 years in the family. It was my dad's first car. He proposed to my mum in Emmeline, we've now named her. She was named in the 1960s, and I've had her for the last 9 years, and with my good friend Alan we are just trying to work on parts to make it look a little bit prettier too.
It certainly does look to be in good condition. How do you find this car to sort of live with and to drive?
Well, she's great. I mean, I don't take her out to do my weekly shopping, but I do take her out on a Sunday. We tootle around about 8 miles an hour.
Okay.
No more than that, so I cause a little bit of a queue where I go. But however, the gentlemen seem to be quite happy to wave at me as they go past, as they appreciate the nearly 90 years.
Yeah, 90, gosh blimey. It's, it sounds a lot when you say it like that, doesn't it? We sometimes forget how old these cars are.
They are.
So yeah, it's obviously been in the family a long time, and I imagine there'll be plenty more years to come with it, hopefully.
Definitely. My son's also into the vintage cars, so he's just bought his first one. He's bought an 100E, but this one will be passed down to him as well, so we keep it within the family as well. More stories.
Okay, so in terms of specification, roughly then, what have we got under the bonnet in here?
So you've just got a 1000cc engine. She's just got a new engine.
Yeah.
Dad in the 80s got 3 engines and made one from it, but there was a little bit too unstable for me. So she had her engine replaced in 2017. She's had a steering column done. Mm-hmm. New wheels and the new leatherwork recently, so she's looking lovely.
Do you tend to find it a challenge to sort of keep the car on the road, or from a maintenance stand, or is it quite an easy car to live with?
It's not something I would have done had it have not been my friend Alan. So he's a key part of Emmeline to keep her helping me with maintaining her and keeping her running.
Smashing. Well, that's great, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Cheers. So I'm with channel viewer David, who's brought along a bit of a modern classic for us today. David, you own this fantastic Mark V Escort. Now, Mark Vs don't always get a lot of love, but this one you've got's immaculate, and it's an XR3i, isn't it?
Yeah, the beauty of this one, Mark, is that it's only done, it's done less than 5,000 miles, and it was originally owned, I bought it 9 months ago, it was originally owned from new by an elderly gentleman who'd run out of steam a bit and put it in his garage, and the last 10 years it's done 100 miles.
Right.
He'd made sure that he'd never let it out in the rain at all, so when I got it, it'd never been in the rain.
Right.
I don't think the front seat or the rear seats had ever been sat in, so they're absolutely immaculate. There's not a speck of rust on it, and because it's the 130 PS, which was unusual, they offered the XR3i in 1992 was offered on a 105 or 130 configuration. And the 130 was a lot more expensive and a lot more to insure.
Yeah.
And more importantly, it was very close to the price of the RS2000.
Yeah.
So people tended not to buy the 130. So it's an extremely rare car. I would think there's probably less than 10 left in the whole country now.
Right.
So, and there won't be any that are less than 5,000 miles, I can tell you.
Well, yeah, be pretty sure of that. And, I mean, Escorts were everyday cars, weren't they? And I imagine a lot of people who bought XR3Is and RS2000s, probably a lot of them would have been driven quite hard, wouldn't they?
Oh yes, absolutely, and because the majority of them were nicked because it was a classic problem with the insurance companies.
There were by early 90s, yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It was the most stolen car. You know, I think it's a great car. I really like the Mark V, and it's starting to come into that classic car window.
Yeah.
You know, where as people are aging, the older cars are falling out of favour and the newer ones are coming in, sort of thing.
But it's quite frightening to think that the Ford Focus is now well over 20 years old. I mean, we're about 98, 99 I think was it the Focus came in.
Absolutely,
yeah. You know, it's hard to think, isn't it, that
I know
we haven't had an Escort now for best part of a couple of decades.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that is, even though the Mark V wasn't quite as well accepted by the Ford glitterati, let's say that, or the Ford enthusiasts as being the most beautiful car they'd ever seen, it did give rise to the Ford Focus.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a major step forward in the Ford development plan over the years.
And the car was evolved through Mark 5B, which didn't last long, and then obviously the Mark 6, which was in many ways the car that the Mark 5 probably should have always been.
You're quite right, yeah. I mean, the other thing to say is that the XR3i and the Mark 5 guys anyway only survived for 2 years anyway, and after that the XR badge has never been used since, and it was replaced originally by the GTI, the Escort GTI, and then the Escort SI. Yeah. So you know, neither of which proved incredibly popular, let's say that.
No, well, I suppose everyone wanted a Cosworth, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we all want a Cosworth, don't we? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, no, it's really it's nice to see one on display that's been preserved. That as I say, that's not a Cosworth.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And as I say, that does make it an incredibly rare car.
Smashing.
So when I saw it, I snapped it up. It said on the advert, the first person that sees it will buy it.
And they weren't wrong.
Yeah, that's right, and they were right.
Well, that's smashing.
Brilliant.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers. Well, it's nice to have a bit of a variety here. We've actually got a Series 2 Land Rover here. This one, I'm told, is actually an ex-Army Land Rover. Got a petrol engine under the bonnet of this one as well. Came with a 2 litre originally. It's now got a 2 1/4 in, but yeah, really good, honest looking vehicle, which is always nice to see. Got plenty of MGBs here today. This one's actually an MGC, so we've got the 6-cylinder engine in there as well, which again, it's interesting. It just sort of marks it out a bit from the crowd. But back in the day, these were actually blighted a bit because they were heavier with that 6-cylinder engine up front, and when they went out on road test, someone had got the tyres slightly underinflated, and from that point on the car had a bit of a reputation for heavy steering. But that said, it may have resulted in the car having a shorter lifespan, but today they're actually very collectible. BMW Z3, but here we've actually got the coupe version, often referred to as the clown shoe due to its body style. Because there are always some cars that you associate with your movie heroes, and I don't think you could feel much more like Steve McQueen than you would in a Mustang like this one here. But it's rather stunning Rolls Royce behind me. It's actually a 1928 model, and this one is the Rolls Royce Phantom. I actually featured a Rolls Royce of this vintage at a show recently, but that was a much smaller model intended to be sort of self-driven. Cars like this though, these were actually the Rolls Royce that were often chauffeur-driven models. Really is a huge car. The engine in this one, I'm told, is the 8 1/4 litre engine. I'm not entirely sure about the coachwork because again, a lot of these cars back in the day, they would have been sold as a chassis and engine, and one of maybe half a dozen or so coach builders would have been responsible for doing the bodies on these cars. But yeah, whoever did this one, it's a stunning car and it certainly has stood the test of time. I've never really saw myself behind the wheel of a Bentley or Rolls Royce, but you've got to really appreciate the craftsmanship of cars like this. So this is a Bentley Arnage in Mulliner spec, and we've got the 6 3/4 litre engine under the bonnet as well. So I'm told this thing really does move. But yeah, it really is like a boardroom on wheels, and I say the craftsmanship's just incredible. The doors are bank vault like. With older cars, sometimes you're a bit worried about when you close the doors that you don't want to slam them, but if you don't slam them, they don't close. This thing's got great big heavy doors, but the gentlest of touches, the door just closes with a nice reassuring thud. Badge engineering is certainly nothing new. Take this ADO 16 behind me, came in many guises. This particular one behind me though is a Vanden Plas, so it's the posh one. Yep, with one of these you really could be flying Alan Bennett class, and that one's even got its bottles of Prosecco and some cherry bakewells on its tray tables back there. It's fantastic. This one's actually a manual gearbox as well. I have seen these with automatic gearboxes, and this one's got this rather nice two-tone green paint as well. What we have here may look like a Jaguar XJ, albeit one in a long wheelbase body. What we actually have here is a Daimler 66, and that's very important. Obviously the Daimler are the sort of plusher models, the 66 is the V12. Now this is actually one of the last of the V12 Jaguars, or Daimlers in this case, and we're actually up to 6 litres in this car. This particular example is actually a Japanese export, so in Japan they do like high-spec cars, and for some reason in Asia they also seem to like cars with a long wheelbase, so you really have got a top-spec model in here. Ford Anglias are certainly no stranger to the classic car scene, but this particular one here is a little bit different to most, because this one is an estate. I'll be honest, I don't think I've seen an estate version of these before, despite being what was probably quite a popular car. I think it's a fantastic looking car, and obviously infinitely more usable as well. Well, this is probably the rarest find here today, a Nissan Prairie. This particular car behind me was actually with the same owner from being about 6 months old up until quite recently. In fact, I think the car was handed down through the family. But the car has done very little mileage. It's very little mileage between services. I think someone's bought this car and just cherished it. But these were remarkable cars. I mean, they were so spacious. And the pièce de résistance is this here. You've got basically a pillarless setup here, so there's no B-pillar on this driver's side. The seat belt is actually engineered to be mounted onto the door, which that is no easy feat to get that sort of thing passed from an engineering standpoint. Very 80s as well, this blue interior. We've even got the original AM/FM radio in there as well, so it's a real time warp. And it's nice to see that people save cars like this, because quite often it's the sports cars and the hot hatches that people invest the money in saving, whereas cars like this, typically once they got to an age where they were no longer economically viable, they all ended up getting scrapped. So really nice to see this car has survived. Now, I've always liked an Alfa Romeo 916 GTV, most notably the GTV 6s with the legendary Busso engine. But this car is not one of those, because this one has actually got a 2-litre twin spark. So why focus so much attention on it then? Well, first of all, people tend to want to save Bussos. You don't always see so many of the twin sparks, and this one's quite an interesting specification anyway. Novello blue paintwork. I've not actually seen one in this colour before, but depending how the light catches it, it does sometimes look a slightly different shade. You get certain colours reflecting in it, and it's just a really nice colour that suits the car. It's also got the full cup pack spec on it, which again, I've only seen the cup pack on the later larger engine Busso cars. So we've got the vent behind the front wheel there, the skirts on the bottom, and the boot spoiler on there as well. Interior is quite special on this car as well, so again we've got the Momo leather, but rather than the black or tan that you often see, this is a really light cream, almost white leather on the seats. and the plastics on the dashboard and the door cards is more, rather than a dark grey or black, we've got this sort of a bluey grey colour, which again, I've never seen one in this specification before, so really nice, interesting looking car. The owner of this car tells me this one's been put back on the road quite recently, and the car has actually been imported from abroad as well, so it did make me wonder whether the specification on this car was unique to that market. I'm actually really liking this Honda NSX that's here. This particular one is an automatic as well. Obviously the Japanese do seem to quite like autos, so you find them in some cars that you wouldn't expect to. But fantastic cars. They really did show that it was possible to build a supercar that perhaps wasn't so fragile. You could build a reliable, usable car. Mid-mounted 6-cylinder engine in there, and this one's got the pop-up lights as well, which sadly later cars did lose. Or perhaps this Maserati 4200 GT. Again, cracking cars. I did prefer the earlier rear end, the 3200s with the boomerang lights. But yeah, these are cracking cars, and you've got this silky smooth V8 engine in there as well. But that's not the only Italian car here, because we've actually got a car here that I did feature last year, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but Lancia Beta Monte Carlo. And again, you just do not see these cars at shows. I did feature this car last year, so I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but all I should say is this is a sort of a one-off almost. You won't find another quite like this. It's got a really interesting story. If you haven't checked out last year's video, do have a look at this one. I really like this beautiful Alfa Giulia Sprint GT. It's a step nose one as well. I'm not entirely sure what's under the bonnet of this car. I know they actually did, I think they did engines as small as 1300cc on these cars, but they're worth quite a bit of money these days. It still amazes me, some of the cars you see here, and you forget how old they are. Ferrari 360 prime example. It's hard to believe that these cars are now over 20 years old. I feel like these only came out just yesterday. So today's video has been something of a whistle-stop tour. I say for a couple of reasons. One being that I forgot my tripod for my other camera, but again, there are far too many cars here for me to feature every one in great detail. Also, I am going to be rather busy with some other projects. I'm going to be down in at Simply French, so I've got that one to film very, very soon, and I'm also working on editing some car videos as well. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so you don't miss any of those future videos that are coming along. And again, check out those channel memberships if you haven't done already, because for the price of a cup of coffee you can be getting early access to some of those car videos. A couple of my channel members have already been enjoying my Corvette review and my MX-5 RF review. Now, I'm actually here with Unofficial Yorkshire Classic Cars, which is my local crew. Check out their Facebook page because they do give information about all the shows that are coming up in the area. They also host their own meets throughout the summer, once a month on a Friday evening at Heath Common in Wakefield. When they have these meets, they're actually starting having a collection bucket for Yorkshire Air Ambulance. So again, it's another fantastic charity, so if ever you're there at their event and you feel like just dropping a couple of quid in the bucket, it'd be very much appreciated, because again, it is another very worthy charity. I'd like to say a big thank you to Weighton Wolds Rotary Club for organising another fantastic event. They've really surpassed themselves with it again this year, and again, they are supporting a cancer charity, so do have a look in the video description for links to that too. As always, comments down below, thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you on the next video very soon, which will be from Bewley at Simply French.